All right. Hello. Welcome to Charismatic Cheetah. My name is Michael. The whole purpose of this channel is to help you think biblically about the spiritual gifts and other things that glorify Jesus Christ. So this will be part 2 of the Cessationist proof text series. Last week we went over 1 Corinthians 13 verses 8 through 10, and we pretty much established that that's a terrible proof text or cessationist. And this week we're going to be going over Hebrews chapter 1 verses 1 and 2. These are the two most common cessationist proof texts that I get. And so we're just going to cover these and we'll go from there. So little recap though, just something that, so a lot of cessationists, at least online and the ones that I interact with, will often accuse charismatics and continuationists of basing their theology off of experience. Now, I don't necessarily disagree that is true. A big part, a big percentage of that is absolutely true within the charismatic movement, the hyper-charismatic movement, at least the part of the movement that has the TVs and the cameras that seem to always be on, stuff like that. But what I don't agree with on that is to say that all charismatics, all continuationists base their theology off of experience. Because if that were the case, then I wouldn't be a continuationist if the Bible didn't back it up, at least as far as I can read it, as far as I can interpret it, as far as I can exegete the text. Cessationism isn't a biblical doctrine, in my opinion. I would actually argue that cessationists base their theology off of experience more than the biblical charismatic continuationists. There is a difference there. But I would say that they actually base their theology off of experience more than the continuationists, right? Because what they would say is, instead of pointing to very clear proof texts of like, hey, where in the New Testament does it say that the gifts will cease with the death of the last apostle, or with the closing of the New Testament canon, or even after 70 AD, after the fall of the temple, which to me makes zero sense, but apparently some believe that. That's when they ceased. Please show me where Paul or one of the apostles or somebody made it clear that, hey, this is what's going to happen when you no longer, quote unquote, need the supernatural apostolic sign gifts. And they can't, right? I mean, simply they cannot. They will point to church history. They'll point to the abuses of the charismatic continuationist movement. They'll point to that kind of thing. And if every now and then, that's why we're covering these cessationist proof texts, every now and then they will point to 1 Corinthians 13, 8 through 10, or Hebrews 1, 1 and 2. But often it's basically, I don't see the sign gifts happening today, therefore they must have ceased. They're no longer continuing. But I would say quite opposite. I would say, for me personally, that, and I think I made this clear in my last video, I would say that if I base my theology off of experience, there's a lot of things I couldn't be, right? Because I haven't seen every single spiritual gift in operation. I haven't seen everything. I haven't seen a lot of things, but that doesn't mean that there's a scriptural support and scriptural argument to be made for the gift ceasing with the death of the last apostle. I would say that, in fact, the scriptures, as far as I can read, actually say quite the opposite. And we covered that in the last video when I talked about 1 Corinthians 12 through 14. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into the text real quick. This shouldn't take long. We're not going to do a whole drawn out thing on this. It's honestly pretty easy to refute because it's worse than the last cessationist proof text that we covered. So okay, so Hebrews chapter 1 verses 1 and 2. So verse 1, God, after he spoke long ago to the fathers and the prophets, and in many ways, many portions and in many ways, in these last days has spoken to us in his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom he also made the world. So that's it, right? And of course, verse 3, and he is the radiance of his glory, the exact representation of his nature, and upholds all things by the word of his power. When he had made purification of sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty on high. Right, so it's very clear, just in that little bit of context right there, just looking at the very next verse after those two verses, that this has nothing to do with continuationism or cessationism, either one. It's actually talking about who Jesus is and how he is set on the right hand of the majesty on high, that he is the exact the radiance of the Father's glory, right? So it's just talking about Jesus and how he is superior to all other everything, angels, David, everything. Okay, so let's just pretend. Let's just, for the sake of argument, let's say that this might be pointing towards cessationism. That cessationism was going to start. So, but if we look at it again, God, after he spoke long ago to the fathers and the prophets, in many portions and in many ways, in these last days has spoken to us in his Son. So spoken to us might be revelation, prophecy, right? Whom he appointed heir of all things, through whom he also made the world. So with the cessationist argument here, and I'm not saying that all cessationists make this argument, I'm just saying that there are some that do, or that try to, but what they would argue in these passages is that there's no more prophets because Jesus came in the flesh. There are no more prophets, and if that's the case, then essentially you have to throw out everything. You have to throw out the whole New Testament, because who wrote the New Testament? Did Jesus write any of the New Testament like himself? Did he actually sit down? No, he didn't. He wrote, obviously the Holy Spirit inspired people like Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Paul, Peter, Jude, these people, right? James. And whoever the writer of Hebrews is, many think that's Paul, or that Luke wrote it based on the preaching of Paul. Either way, it's very Pauline in its theology. But you'd have to throw out everything in the New Testament. In fact, the very book that we're actually pointing to right here, that we're actually looking at, the text that you are saying points to cessationism, that after Jesus there's going to be no more prophecy, God wasn't going to speak to people anymore, anything other than through his Son. Well, that actually, I can't even use that text if this is true, because that means that everything after Jesus, including the 12 apostles, including the New Testament prophets we read in Acts, including whoever Paul was talking to in the Corinthians, which is the average believer in Corinth, when he said, earnestly desire spiritual gifts, especially that you may prophesy. You have to throw all that out, right? Including the book. The passages that they point to. So this is a very easy one to refute. It's just a terrible argument. That's not what it's saying. And again, if that's the case, then the only way I could only be spoken to through his Son, through Jesus, would be by direct revelation. You see what I'm saying? Because if everything after Jesus if God only spoke through Jesus from the time of Jesus on, right, and not through man, not through his people, not through the apostles or anybody else, that means that Jesus' words that were written down by the apostles, right, that I can't use those either. So I would have to have direct revelation, prophecy from Jesus himself to me, and that's the only way I could know that the gospel is the truth. So again, very easy to discredit. I was tempted to not even make this video, but I had to. So I do want to say one more thing before I wrap this one up, and that is something that I've been kind of thinking about and pondering on. And this is a message to my charismatic continuationist brothers and sisters, right? So take it for what it is, right? And this is just one man's opinion, but something that, especially after the roundtable discussion between Brown Storms, Justin Peters, and Osman, is that something that us charismatics continuationists need to do better, absolutely have to do better, is we have to start being able to call out when something is not orthodoxy, when something's heterodoxy, when something is not Christian, when something is dangerous, we need to get better at calling it out, calling a spade a spade. Obviously, we have to have room for grace, right? We don't want to just throw everyone we disagree with under the bus as a false teacher or a false prophet. We need to measure it, and we need to address these things individually, right? But at the same time, we need to get better at calling a spade, and instead of just we've got to give them grace. It can't always be that way, because Jesus was very, and also Paul and Peter, these guys also were. John was, the Apostle John was. They were very much not afraid to name names. They were not afraid to call a false teacher, false prophet, false prophet. They weren't allowed. They weren't afraid of doing these things. And I think that we need to follow their example when we're dealing with, especially people who are claiming to be teachers, claiming to be leaders in the church. Then they have to be held to a higher standard than the average believer. And I'm speaking about myself right now too, because as soon as I'm putting myself on this, it's a very small platform. It's just a small YouTube channel and Christian meme page. But even me, like I will be held to a higher, stricter judgment for my little bit of teaching that I'm doing here, and the couple times that I've preached. And I'm actually preaching this coming Monday, day after Easter, at an outreach thing. So I'll try to record that and post that. But I will be held to a higher standard. And so I think that we need to make sure that we're doing that with fellow with brothers and sisters in Christ, especially brothers who are leaders and teachers in the church. So, okay, well, I thank y'all very much for listening to this one. I think next time, I don't know if I'm going to do a part 3. I would love to hear some more cessationist proof texts. If you're a cessationist and you have some proof texts that you would like me to go over, and to maybe I can chew on that and cover that in a video, let me know. If you're continuationist charismatic and you've heard you've heard a proof text that you'd like me to go over, well, leave me a comment. Anyway, subscribe, share. Thank you.